I first encountered you, we were just talking about before we got started, you gave this wonderful lecture about Eureka many years ago.
That's right.
And Eureka is a way of a machine discovering physics. It was really mind-blowing at the time. This is already 10 years old though, but just maybe we can start there and talk about the more recent innovations with that. Tell us about Eureka for the uninitiated. What is it doing? How can a machine discover the laws of physics?
So the idea is with Eureka and some of the work that we did before that was to sort of use evolution to basically breed laws of physics. Okay. So the idea is basically, we do this actually naturally. We come up with all kinds of hypotheses. Here's an idea of a law of physics. Let's see if it fits data. And it's more than just fitting data. You can propose experiments, and hopefully the data from these new experiments will refute some of the laws. In fact, you want to propose experiments that deliberately create disagreement between predictions of competing hypotheses. That's the basis of scientific discovery. So that's what the machine does.
And how does it make that initial, it just guesses a random combination of symbols and things?
Exactly, random combination of symbols, completely random laws. Of course, they're all wrong, but some of them are slightly less bad than other ones.
Okay,
and then it looks for, what is the next experiment to do that causes the most disagreement between these laws. Okay, so it's going to be some point that with these laws really disagree about what's going to happen, and that's the experiment it either does physically if it's connected to a experimental system, or if it's an observational system, it goes to the database and looks for the data point that's closest to that disagreement. And the important thing, it doesn't just fit to all the data. It just looks one point at a time, and that point has to be the point of maximum disagreement. So it's actually sort of, it doesn't see the entire observation at once. It just has to ask for something, and it gets that. And this is really, really important, that it doesn't just fit to the entire data set. It just creates hypotheses. So it does that literally billions of times a second.
Wow.
Creates an hypothesis, and looks for a data point, and then adjusts and creates more hypotheses, throws some out. And if you do that enough times, it's surprising what you get. You get pretty good, for things we know, we get the answers that we expect. And for things you don't know, you get interesting new things. Now, are these results the truth? I mean, who knows? You look at this, rub your chin and scratch your head, and if it makes sense, it makes sense. If it doesn't, then you ask yourself why. I mean, it's a tool.
It feels a little bit like when you play chess against the computer. At least I don't know how the current chess algorithms work, but it was really a brute force approach, right? It would kind of calculate every possible chess move it could possibly do, 2, 3, even 100 moves ahead, and then it would just choose the one that leads to the most successful outcomes. If it's trying, there's obviously a little bit different to how the human mind would work with this problem. And is there a transition with the new wave of AI that we're seeing to move away from this kind of brute force approach, or is that still underpinning a lot of how these creative physical inferences are happening?
I think what's this idea of the really important thing about Eureka at the time was this idea of adversarial learning, which is now very, very common actually with the modern AI, is that you don't just try to fit a model to data. You have two things competing and challenging each other at the same time. So what we did back then with Eureka was we had models that fit a small subset of the data, and those subsets of the data moving around to try to defeat the model. This is where you look for that data point that the models disagree about the most. So these data points are trying to defeat the models are trying to explain away the data, and they sort of have this antagonistic relationship between them going back and forth. That's called adversarial learning. It's at the core of a lot of the modern AI techniques that we see. All these generative art, all of that behind the scenes is typically two types of two AIs
arguing.
If, for example, if you look at deep fake photos behind the scenes, there's one AI that creates photos, and the other AI tries to tell if they're real or fake. And in the beginning, the one AI creates garbage. It doesn't even look remotely like a photo, but the other AI cannot tell the difference between garbage and a real photo. So this it's the blind leading the blind. They don't know how to do it, but after doing this for millions or billions of cycles, they get very, very good at it. One creates really, really good photos. The other one can distinguish between a very good fake photo and the real thing. And they both challenge each other and they get better. And this is the same thing we did back then with Eureka, but sort of for a scientific.
I guess in that case, then it's you give it the symbols, the variables. So this could be like distance, time, velocity, things like this. And then you must also tell it some boundaries, some rules. So it's only allowed to use maybe 100 symbols. Is there rules like that, or there's certain operations it can use?
Right.
Maybe multiply, addition.
Yeah.
So you
have to give it the alphabet.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Here are the variables you can use. You can use plus, minus, divide, multiply, exponents, and if you get, when we wrote the software initially, we gave the user this. A menu, and there was a button, select all, and people just said, I get, try out everything. But that turns out that's not a good approach, because the more operators you allow, the search space increases exponentially.
Okay.
And so you want to actually, this is where you come in as a scientist and say, look, this is a biology data set, so sine and cosine are not relevant. There's no sine and cosine in biology. Take that out, but there's other things. So you bring in that kind of knowledge at a higher level and you shrink the search space, and then it works.
But presumably that was 10 years ago when Eureka came on the scene. Machines have obviously improved massively over that time. It's presumably getting easier and easier for you to explore larger and larger volumes. And I guess one question I have in mind as a physicist, thinking of like general relativity, we had to invent new mathematics for GR, like tensors didn't really exist and were really developed in hand. And think about even calculus was developed by Newton in part because he needed it to solve celestial mechanics. Is there, obviously this is not something that is happening right now in Eureka or its derivatives, but is there any hope of getting to that very high level of competing with how a mathmatician would think about these problems?
Well, I would say not only there is hope, but we've actually done some of that. So it goes even one step further. So there's one step further, which is to invent new kinds of physics, or to transform the data in some new way that makes it reasonable to understand. But I think a deeper question that bothered me for a long time when we did Eureka back then was, we measured a couple of variables. For a double pendulum, which we published our paper with, we measured angle and angular velocity of the two arms of the pendulum, and then it found the physics. It discovered a lot of physics. But the question back then was, how did we even know to measure angle and angular velocity? I mean, it's not an obvious thing. If you on a double pendulum, we study physics, we know that angular velocity is an important thing for describing a dynamical system. But
it's like the physicist's intuition was helping out there that it doesn't have.
Exactly. But how did we know to measure that thing? And if I show you some other dynamical system, I show you an anthill with moving ants, what do you measure? I mean, what's the variable to measure? So we did this is just recent paper where we said, we're just going to show the machine just a video stream of a dynamical system, and we're going to ask it, what are the variables? Once you have the variables coming up with a physical law based on these variables, I think that's the easy step.
So you don't tell it frequency, angle, none of that. It's just
a
the
raw
video
feed. Just a raw video.
Okay.
Okay.
That's amazing.
Okay, and ask it, what are the variables? And what are the variables that describe the system? And the way we did this, so it works, but it works in the answers is not what you expect, right? so for example, we gave it double pendulum, we showed a raw video. The way we did this is we we said, okay, you take the 2 frames of the video and you have to predict the next 2 frames of the video, right? And you have to do that at many scales. In the next 2 frames at a millisecond, or the next 2 frames at 100 milliseconds or something like that. So it has to make these predictions, and it does it very well. So it can predict the next frames of the video. So now they can predict the video. Okay, if it can predict the video well, it must understand the physics. It's there inside this huge neural network. It must know something about how a double pendulum works. Now we have to extract those variables out of that system. So we force that neural network, we throttle it into like a bow tie. So it can go from, it has to predict the next frames from the previous frames, but it's only allowed to communicate 4 numbers or 5 numbers or 6 numbers. And for a double pendulum, you can see that if you allow it to communicate 10 numbers, it can do it well. If you can communicate 8,000 numbers, it does it really well. If you allow it to communicate 4 numbers, it can do it. But if you allow it to communicate 3 numbers, it can't.
Okay, so you can tell that 4
so
is the minimum
take 4
number.
is number. And there's some clever math that you can do to get to that number right away in a very, very kind of, it's sort of the dimensionality of the manifold that this network is sitting on. But the bottom line is you kind of squish it and you don't allow it to communicate more than 4 numbers. And once you force it to go to that 4 numbers, those 4 numbers are the variables.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
Now, it's not unique. It does not choose angle and angular velocity. What does it choose? It chooses something else. And this is, we don't know what it chooses. It's sort of like going to an alien intelligence and ask them, they might have physics that uses different variables. They don't have to describe the world using the variables we choose. And so it chooses some other variables. It can predict the future perfectly in that world. But the variables are not something that we have any intuition about. So that's what we're stuck with right now.
Can you even relate? Is it just all kind of hidden in this black box, or can you relate what it thinks of the variables to the variables that a physicist would assign?
Yeah. You can see for every frame what's the value of these 4 variables.
Yeah.
You can plot it as a function of time. And we tried everything. We say, is this energy? You could describe a double pendulum with kinetic and potential energy of each arm. It doesn't have to be. Maybe it's the square of the velocities. We can create a neural network that goes from what it describes it to the way we want to describe it, but it's not something intuitive. So that's the next step, is to try to understand how it thinks about physics, but it is able to do it. And so it works for a double pendulum. It works and we pointed the camera at a fireplace, and it said this in all this fire flames, 24 parameters. Variables describe the whole thing.
A fireplace is 24 parameters.
That's it. That's it. That's at least that's, you can describe all of it with just 24 numbers.
So originally there's obviously every pixel is a data point. So there's like thousands, and you've reduced those thousands down to just some combinations of the pixels essentially, which is those 4 numbers that it's playing around with.
Yeah, exactly.